Watch.
Welcome back, guys, to another episode of The Ravens Watch. I am your host, David Lee Corbo, aka The Raven, and we have a super cool topic lined up for you today. It's something that I'm very interested in. I don't really know too much about it. I was just explaining to these guys that there aren't many things that I'm not at least peripherally aware of, and this topic is at the edge of my periphery. And that topic would be Lilith. And everybody knows that we're big into the Nephilim, the fallen, all of these sort of biblical characters on this show. And so this is certainly a piece of the puzzle that we're going to need to plug in to see the bigger picture. We are here with Reality Czars. Gentlemen, would you mind introducing yourselves, letting the audience know where they can find you, plug in your socials, things of that nature?
Yeah, absolutely. We are the Reality Czars, Nate and Thomas. We delve into absolutely everything. There's some dudes working on a roof right next to me. So if you hear some weird fucking sounds, I have no control over that right now. But you can find us on Rockfin, Spotify, all your podcatchers. Join our Telegram group and share spicy memes. You can follow us on Instagram, Twitter, all that fun stuff. Thomas has a lot of really cool shit that he can promote and has some fun stuff to talk about. Thomas is also known as the paranoid motherfucking American. Thomas, throw some socials, buddy.
That's right. I'm the paranoid American. My little QAnon cup. paranoidamerican.com, at paranoidamerican on Instagram. We also meet at the docks after midnight on Wednesdays. So if anyone wants to come out and just hang and try and shoot Bigfoot and shoot at aliens,
dick in hand.
Yeah, go to the third bridge. Go to the third bridge after midnight, right at the end of the docks. We're all there.
If it's your first night, you have to jerk off.
That's the rule.
I won't lie to you. You guys got me already. Nothing's better than a midnight hang on the dock, dick in hand. Consider me there.
Dick and docks is what we call it.
Well, guys, let's get right into it. I am really interested in this topic. I have a dog shit version of it in my mind. It's like Lilith was the queen of monsters, and that's about as far as we go until we hit the autism wall, and all of any other information is lost. It slips right through the net. I don't know anything else beyond that. I just know that she plays a crucial role in sort of the damnation of humanity and the bringing of these entities into this realm. And if I'm totally wrong on that, you can tell me to shut the hell up and take it from here. Go ahead, guys.
Shut the hell up. So I just wanted to preface this with, I'm definitely not an expert at Lilith, but I've got an interesting thread that we can pull at and kind of figure out some of the background. But Lilith is probably, if you're into like Kabbalah and tarot and like ancient, like Sumerian and Babylonian, you'll probably hear some stuff that we say and be like, these idiots don't know what the hell they're talking about. And you got us. So we're going to just call it out early. Got us. We don't know what we're talking about. But is this for kids? This is a kids show, right?
No, this is definitely not for kids.
Say whatever we want. You're going to edit it afterwards? Or what? Are we live streaming on YouTube, children, or what?
No, we're not. You can say whatever you want. You're just not allowed to talk about injections and the thing that starts with the letter C. Only because I just got my account striked against.
Oh, well, in that case, I'm going to do you a favor, because the word that I was going to say might have gotten you strike too. So we're going to call it thrill oxide. And if you go on Google and search for thrill oxide, you'll see what that's about. I got a documentary on it. So my research into thrill oxide, wink, wink, that it started a few years ago, and I was just going to write like a silly comic about it. And I long story short, I went all the way in, and I basically was trying to pull apart what is all of this satanic, like ritual, torture, like political magic stuff about, specifically when it comes to man, there's so many words that'll just get it flagged, but like it's a letter of the alphabet, they're anonymous, things like that. But there was like this big exception, right? What was the latest movie, the Sound of Freedom, and the whole sort of like crowd of like, we're gonna go and save the children. So there's some very specific components to this specifically when it comes to like sacrifice and blood rituals and like eating things to get magic out of them. And I was just trying to figure out, like, when did this actually start? When was the first instance when someone saw, like an infant and was like, there's magic in that thing. And if we just do X, Y, and Z, then like it'll rain more and the crops will grow more. So that's kind of where it started from, was like all these weird fertility rites and sacrificial rites. And I tied this all the way back as I could to the Stone Age and then slowly crept forward. And as I crept forward, there was this one specific thread that I started to pull at. So around 1700 to 2200 BC, Babylon, there becomes these references to like Marduk and Bel, and specifically these gods Lamashtu and Pazuzu. And everyone that's seen Exorcist, was it 2 or 3? That's the Dahmer one. The one that Dahmer liked the most had Pazuzu in it, and it's got like that gnarly little statue. But Pazuzu, in my opinion, is where you kind of have to start when we start talking about Lilith. And that's because, and I'm looking at some of my notes here so I can be as accurate as possible, because this stuff spreads its wings and gets really weird. So Lamashtu was related to Pazuzu, and Lamashtu was a goddess that would kidnap babies and kill unborn children by tapping on the mother's stomach 7 times. And then people back in Babylonian times, they would wear all kinds of amulets. They had spells that were written out. They had these things called prayer bowls, which you would basically, or like an incantation bowl where you would draw like a goddess on it or a god and like write, please don't take my children. Please don't take my children. A big spiral, and you'd go buried out in the yard. So in this, people were trying to protect themselves from Lamashtu, and she kind of represented anything that could go wrong during pregnancy and childbirth. And as you can imagine, in 2200 BC, there was a number of things that could go wrong, and the infant mortality rate was fairly high. So they had all sorts of mythology and gods and rites that would try and help prevent, any sort of problems to arise. So Lamashtu in this regard is sort of like, if anything goes wrong, it's her fault. And if it's her fault, then it's probably your fault because you did something to bring her on, or you didn't pay her enough respect, or your husband had like a wet dream one night, and sorry, now you can't have kids anymore. So it starts with Lamashtu.
Is it?
Yeah, and there's so many different ways to say and pronounce it. Lamashtu is one of them. And then this, in my mind, Lamashtu and Pazuzu, this combination of them, they kind of join forces and amalgamate over time. And this eventually turns into Lilith. But I'm going to take a break here so we can start talking.
So yeah, the whole Lamashtu thing is really interesting. What is that a Sumerian thing?
So it's basically at the heart of like Abrahamic religions in general. But yeah, we're talking about Babylonian god, and by the time it becomes Lamashtu, it's already sort of been adapted over the years. The very first mention, I think it was 2400, was the Ebla tablets. And the Ebla tablets, they mentioned I believe one of the first times where they mentioned Dagon, Hada, El, Ashtar, Kamish, and Moloch. And this is also where they list Dagon and Hada first before anyone else. And just because of that reason, we've interpreted, over millennia, that Dagon was basically like the head of these gods at some point. Might have just been alphabetical or something, but that was the assumption. And then Hada, which was the number 2, that becomes Baal Hadad. And then Baal Hadad, over again lots of time and amalgamations, just becomes Baal. So like the god in the Bible where they say they're worshiping Baal or they're worshiping Moloch, that's very likely this Baal Hadad and Malik. And Malik just kind of meant like king, I believe, just like Baal kind of meant king. So that's the real origin. If you try to trace it back as close as possible, around 2400 BC, the Ebla tablets, and then from there, it just is like this long like evolution / de-evolution process where many gods become fewer gods and fewer, all the way until, the Phoenicians and Carthage falls to Rome. And then it's like over the next 1,000 years, all gods become one god.
Man, that's really interesting. A lot of this topic that comes up a lot on this show, and it's all because I pulled at one little thread where I seem to have found a connection between Zeus and Baal.
Oh, and yeah, big time.
Yeah, so Baal was the king of storms, or he was described as the king of storms. Zeus, obviously, king of storms. They have everybody's when I describe this thinks I'm describing a trident. I'm not describing a trident. It's a three-pronged object. On either end, there are three prongs, and it's very short. It's held with one hand, and it's only, the width of I don't know, like a football or something like that. That's what I see in the images, and I've seen images of Zeus holding that, and I imagine that is, that kind of where we get the imagery of Zeus holding the lightning bolt. And I've also seen Baal holding that as well, the same object. And so this thing seems to be, maybe I'm late to the party, and I probably am, but there is so much compelling evidence for all of these various deities throughout time. They're the same dudes. They're the same entities from the beginning of the story. Just like you said, their names evolve or devolve. They shorten, they hyphenate, they but there's always something at the root of the etymology of the name where, what was it? Baal Hadad was what you...
Yeah, and you just mentioned Zeus, and there was another name for Zeus, which was Baal Zephyr, I believe, and that was had to do with like the Zephyr Mountains or Zephyr Cave, and that just basically meant the god of this area, and that area happened to be where Zeus was claimed to have been born. So that Baal prefix, over time, like you're saying, like all gods eventually become one god in monotheism. So the Baal part is just like the great or like the god of this area. So there was literally a god called like the god of this Zephyr Cave area, and that was Zeus. But because it started with Baal, then all the other Baals kind of got pushed into that. So Baal Zephyr and Baal Hadad, as far as I'm aware, were completely different gods. It was like saying God 1 and God 2, but then they just kind of get merged together. Then there's a really easy explanation on how that merging happens. But I want to let Nate get some dick jokes in here.
Yeah, dick jokes. I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, I have no dick joke to add to this, but just... yes, it all seems to absolutely come from all the same stories. And it's extremely fascinating. And like a little bit of research that I did like a couple years ago, I really pissed some people off, and they called me a Gnostic goober because I was tying together the idea that Yahweh or El was basically the same deity as like Saturn and Kronos, and people got fucking pissed off.
Yep.
But I mean, all of this stuff. So I guess I worship Saturn. I guess, whatever. But yeah, I mean, all of this stuff has like a very similar origin, and it all seems to be coming out of like the Sumerian area.
Well, here's a quick example. Have either of you guys familiar with Voltron?
Yeah.
You know what Voltron is, right? The little robots that come together. Do you know what those little individual people's names are that come together to form Voltron, or do you just know who Voltron is?
Yeah, dude, I just know Voltron. Yeah,
right. But that doesn't mean that Voltron's not an amalgamation of a bunch of different things. And if those, I thought you were going to tell me of other, like the Voltron is the Mosh too, and we've been all sacked. No, I'm just. But like the easiest explanation that I've come across that kind of clicked for me, and hopefully it clicks for someone else out there too, but. Imagine that like me and Nate come from different sides of the country, which we actually do. He's complete, West Coast. I'm complete East Coast. So in ancient Sumeria or Babylon or wherever you want to take your pick, we might have our own god of death, and people in my area might die for completely different reasons than people in Nate's area. So we're both like worshiping and have our own, sacrifices and rites to kind of appease this god of death to prevent anything bad from happening to us. And then if we both meet up in, Texas, and we kind of like get into this little town, and the town's like, okay, now let's decide who our god of death is. And it's going to have to do with like rattlesnakes and scorpions and deserts and stuff maybe. And it won't really be compatible with Nate's concept of death or mine. And my concept of the death god won't be the same as Nate's concept of the death god. And on top of that, if he sees me worshiping my death god, and he's like, what the hell are you doing, man? Like, if you don't worship to this other guy, then we're all going to be screwed, So then it's like there's all these arguments like, no, my god is the right god for death, or enter anything, of if the god is for fertility, or if the god is for protecting your children. it's like it just gets so messy when 20 people from different regions all move to this new area, and then they're fighting over like the tiniest little minutia. So at a certain point, it becomes just convenient for the state, or like, you know, the city or the city state to be like, okay, guys, here's the death god. You know, it's Voltron. It's got a little bit of your guy. It's got a little bit of your guy. The three of them are going to come together, and we're going to call it this new thing. And that's going to be all your guys' thing. So now when Nate prays to the death god and I pray to the death god and you pray to the death god, like we can all focus on this one amalgamation, and I see my god in it and Nate sees his god in it. And then now you do that again, and now take 20 people from those cities that have already amalgamated their gods and bring them together. And they're like, crap, we got to do this all over again. You know, here's the new death god. And now it's like, it keeps building on top of that. And if you imagine, if you started with 1,000 gods and then end up with one god, bam, now you got Yahweh. And from Yahweh, you got to pull back apart and get Bacchus and Dionysus and, you know, Apollo and Jupiter and everybody. Like they're all inside that one big thing that we kind of call God now. So, and if I'm wrong, lightning strike me down right now.
Dude, that would have been some shit. If that happened, that would have been I would have been like, thanks for the episode, dude. That was fucking amazing. You know, it's like a fucked up game of telephone, except with gods, right? It just keeps getting passed down the line and keeps changing a little bit. It reminds me a lot of the way that, the Haitians hid their belief system within Catholicism so that they weren't, you know, they were basically good practicing Catholics and no one would try to persecute them or push them for their belief system. But in reality,
throughout time, and even like, every single one of them. And so, I mean, that was the whole adoption of saints and worshiping saints and idolatry and having their idols. And they don't like to call it that. Iconography. Sorry, my ortho bros out there. But every single one of those to me is just like a different, man, I had the word I had tip of my tongue. It's been a long day. Sorry. But yeah, every single one of those to me is, it is just an adoption of different gods that have kind of been like archetypes that they've created and made and kind of adopted and put into one religion. And it's fascinating to me because the whole idea, like the more and more that I research religion and theology and I go back further and further, it doesn't make me doubt my religion because I still consider myself a Christian. I just find myself because I used to literally pray to Yahweh and things like that. But I just pray now to the Creator because I have these really long, like epic conversations with folks that are Buddhists, that are, you know, all kinds of different religions. And to me, it's fascinating all the commonalities that we all have in our the major talking points of our religion. And to me, it is just one creator, and we've all just played this giant game of telephone, and now we fight over it, and it's silly to me. And so, does that make me less of a Christian? I don't think so, because my archetype is Jesus Christ. That's who my God is. That's who I worship. But I mean, I've heard compelling arguments that, like, I don't know, that Julius Caesar was Jesus. I've heard some interesting arguments that Muhammad was Jesus. I've heard some interesting arguments that like Buddha was Jesus and that we are all talking about one dude that lived. And if you want to get weird with like the history and how it was all overlapped and they're lying to us about our timelines. And I don't know, man, it's all fucking fascinating. And that's the whole, I guess, idea too of like Christ consciousness and there's multiple Christs. And I don't know, man. It's fascinating.
Well, it is there has to be a lot of forgiveness granted to people because, like you just mentioned, our history's been demolished on such a grand scale. You know, the concept of resets, like civilization has been reset in, uncountable number of times. We've lost so much in the process. The burning of the Library of Alexandria, so much history has been lost, and there's just a lot of people trying to piece things together. I do want to ask you, when it comes to these deities or these entities or however you want to label them, are you under the impression that it's strictly allegorical, or that these were actual entities that have or maybe do exist, or is it a alchemical mixture where there's multiple layers to these things? They're both allegories as well as entities, as well as, who knows, things that are beyond our comprehension?
Dude, the only answer for me is yes. All of that.
Yeah, yes to all the above.
No, I mean, yeah, it's absolutely fascinating, man. It feels like I said, a giant game of telephone that like there was probably some giant fucking reset. I don't know if it has something to do with the pole shifting and there's some giant fucking cataclysm that like stopped humanity and it's fucking, and there was a few psychopaths that lived, or I don't even know if they were psychopaths at the time. Those were the people that just like lived, maybe the people that were in charge and had some sort of technology and held out, and those are the people that have like occulted, I guess, maybe some of that technology now, and we're all just a bunch of peons. They think that they actually know the answers and maybe are in charge. And I honestly don't think that they are in charge. I feel like it's like an ant riding a bull, these like psychos. I listened to an old interview with Matt LaCroix the other day, and he was talking about how he thinks that all this weather manipulation is them trying to stop this giant cataclysm that is just on repeat, like it happens every 12 to 15,000 years, right, with the whole pole shift, and that they're trying to stop it from happening, which is interesting. I don't think that they are going to be able to stop it, but it kind of humanized some of these like psychopaths that are in charge. Like, what if all these psychos, like even like I don't know, the Rothschilds, what if they're good guys? They're trying to stop this crazy thing from happening. And like, they're doing a bunch of crazy fucking shit, but like
they're just getting rich doing it.
Yeah, it's I don't know, man. I mean, is that what the Illuminati really
trying to do the right thing?
Ones? Like, do they actually know the answers? Do they actually know what the fuck's going on? And we're just like, I don't know, dude. But I feel like all these different histories from all over the world, all these different religions are all just telling the same tale about this crazy cataclysm. We're fighting over who's right, but we're all right. And maybe there are a couple people that actually knew what happened, but I don't know, man. It's fucking interesting. But I do believe in like the paranormal. I do believe in like these entities and these higher power. And like I've had these experiences in my life that were so real that I can't explain it away. So to me, I've had like just interventions in my life that have happened that I say is absolutely from God. Like things that have happened in my life that if one thing had happened, I wouldn't be here right now, or just like all these little things. And you can call that like coincidences or things like that. And maybe I'm just, keen to like mystical thinking or something, but I definitely believe in God. Absolutely. Now, what is it? I don't know.
Nate, do you have any, maybe a story or two that you could share about what pushed you to believe this? Because
yeah,
if you want, I'll go first. I'll give you the abridged version because I'm also a believer in Christ, and there's a very specific reason for it. I've always been sort of a nuts and bolts kind of guy. I need the information. I need to see. I've always been a conspiracy theorist. Probably it's been about 16 years now, and it was always information driven. Now, all that was just me seeing things that didn't make sense. And then somebody comes along with some information that does plug in nicely. And I go, would you look at that? And so religion was always a stretch for me. I was not raised religious. I didn't have a church upbringing or anything of that nature. But what ends up happening to me is I have like these spots of experiences throughout my life where I see something or, something unexplainable. But if you've experienced anything like that, you might have the same experience where it almost doesn't matter. You have a weird, unexplainable experience, but like life goes on. And if you can't explain it, you look at if somebody experienced it with you, you shrug it off. And it's just kind of a fun story to tell sometimes, but mostly you forget about it. And so my life is kind of filled with those things. But then one day what ends up happening is my audience has heard this, but I love sharing it because I think it's my most important story. It's like a testimony, and it kind of helps me feel like I'm bringing people closer to God. So I moved to Vegas from New Jersey, pack everything in a small Elantra of my family, and we drive 42 hours to Las Vegas and we try to cut it out over there. And we are out there for maybe like 8 months. And, I have a job and we're kind of getting traction, but it doesn't feel like home. right? But I'm struggling with this feeling of failure. I don't want to just throw the towel in because look what I've done. I've driven 42 hours across the country. I've got to really stick this out and see if we can. I hate to go home with my tail between my legs, you know? So what ends up happening is there's an illness in the family, and it's my wife's brother. We have to go back to New Jersey. But truthfully, I was like, that was what would you call those things? Were a flotation device. It was a lifesaver. And I didn't want to acknowledge it as that. So but I did use it to go back to New Jersey. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, man, I'm happy this is happening. And that makes me feel guilty. So, you know, we land with the in-laws. They're wonderful people. They give us a place to crash before we get out on our feet, about a month and a half, 2 months. But for that time, I am a shell of a man. I'm not interacting with the in-laws. I'm barely there for my wife. I'm barely there for my son. And I guess I'm starting to suffer from like anxiety, depression, anger, you know, but I'm not really good at reading that in myself. So what that manifested as was me sitting in a room playing Red Dead Redemption 2 every single day until we got our own apartment. And so it's a terrible situation. I'm basically absent. And I don't think you can escape those sorts of things. I think when you drop the ball on that much of a level, the internal narrator, or let's even say God, lets you know, like, hey, dude, you suck and you should be doing better. But instead you're playing Red Dead Redemption 2 and it's an awesome game and I get it. But right now you suck. You got bigger things to do and you're not doing them. So now enter this 4-night escapade where every day I'm in the room playing video games. And then, you know, I go to sleep on an air mattress and my son's on another air mattress. My wife's next to me. And the first night I wake up to somebody knocking and I pop up out of bed and it's like 3 a.m. Who the hell's knocking at 3 a.m? I go to the window. No one's there. I go, okay. I lay back down. And as soon as I drift off, somebody's knocking again. Now I'm freaked out because I realize like, oh shit, nobody else in the house hears this. My wife isn't disturbed. There's nobody at the door every time I look. This is happening to me. Because, you know, I what did you say? A mystical mind or something like that? I think that way. So I pretty quickly, I'm putting the shit together. I'm like, this is fucking spooky. So it happens again. And now I'm on my phone till like 4 a.m, 5 a.m, 6 a.m. The sun comes up. I go to work. I can't go back to sleep. The next night, and I keep it to myself. The next night, something's pulling on my arm. I wake up and my arm's getting pulled. And I'm fucking freaked out, you know, but what do? There's nothing to do. You just kind of look around and you look at your phone and you go back to sleep. My arm gets pulled again. This time I tuck it under the blanket. So I fall asleep, my arm's under the blanket. Something pulls my leg. That's night number 2, right? And I'm getting really fucking bothered. I'm getting really freaked out. I don't know what to do about it. I don't want to share it with anybody because I don't want to draw attention to it. Night 3 rolls around and I have a nightmare about this kind of like jacked. He was kind of jacked a little bit. Skin that was like a leopard print, but it was gray and black. That was the color scheme of his skin. And his eyes were like bright red, like maraschino cherries. And he had canines on the bottom that were overlapping the lip. All the dream is me looking at this dude in a room filled with black swirling smoke. And he's looking back at me and he's just heaving with rage. Like his chest is rising and dropping, rising and dropping. And so don't remember how that dream ends, but I know that I wake up in the morning and my wife tells me, man, I had a terrible nightmare last night where I looked over to you. This is my wife saying this. She looks over to me and there is this monster on my chest pinning me into the bed with glowing red eyes, but she can't move. She's never experienced sleep paralysis, but that's what she was describing to me. And I go, fuck, man, that's crazy. Like, I don't want to tell her because now I've got a whole nother problem. I don't want to worry my wife. I don't want to give this attention. I don't really know what the move is. So I'm just keeping my thoughts to myself. And then fast forward to the 4th night, seemingly everything's good. I wake up in the morning to my wife waking me up and she's taking a video of my neck where you would take your fingers and check a pulse is throbbing. So I'm having like some kind of rough dream and she thinks it's so wild. She records it for like 15 seconds and then she wakes me up. And as I'm looking at the video, suddenly my son pops up and starts screaming from a nightmare about a monster with glowing red eyes. Never was religious, never had any of that. Prayed real hard to Jesus Christ, super hard to Jesus Christ because I need recourse. It's now affecting my family. And I was so cornered and so unbelievably desperate. and it changed everything. And let me tell you, it's stuck with me to this day. That was maybe 2 years ago. Everything stopped on a dime. And since then, I've had a lot of weird experiences where I just throw homeboy's name around left and right. I'm like, in the name of Christ, get the fuck out of my house, like left and right. I have no problems doing that these days. But it changed the trajectory of, how I looked at the world and how I conducted myself going forward for the past 2 years. So, I call it a blessing, because without that information, I would have never, maybe not never, but I wouldn't have likely gone in that direction. But I was shown some terrible shit, and it changed things for me, So I think that is my one anchor. It's like, I don't know a lot of things. I have a lot of ideas. I speculate on a lot of shit. This show is all about speculation. But one thing I know is I'm never going to deny the name of Christ, because I would feel like a total dick. Like dude stuck it out for me when I was super desperate. And then for me to just be like, yeah, I don't know, maybe he's just like an allegory or something like that. Like I won't even like, I don't know what he is, but it's real in a sense that I can't comprehend, So that's my testimony. Nate, do you have anything, like what pushed you into this realm of being so sure that things are spiritual? And
yeah, man, it's a fascinating, dude. Thank you for sharing that. That's a fucking awesome story, dude. That's fucking amazing. I mean, I grew up like hyper religious, dude. Like hyper religious. My mom is like the most religious, and like to the point where I was like taught like to cast out demons when I was like a kid, and like
in tongues too, right?
Like,
what's that? In tongues.
Yeah, I still speak in tongues to this day.
Oh, what's it called? No, wait, that's a fish eater. Episcopalian.
Glossosalia.
Pentecostal is what you're looking for.
There we go. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, the denomination. Yeah.
I'm a flavor of Pentecostal Christian, so absolutely. Probably some sort of evangelical. I don't like to necessarily label myself. I don't even use the word Christian anymore. I use the term Christ follower.
I like that.
And but for me, like I said, I was born hyper religious, and from the time I can remember being a little kid, I remember accepting Christ into my heart and having that conversation, and then just literally knowing He was with me at all times. And then as a teenager, I started doing all the drugs, and it started rebelling hard, and went through like some pretty crazy atheist phases. And I'm trying to remember exactly what brought me back to Christ. I think it was mostly that I just become like a pretty hard leftist. I was like a socialist, anarchist that hated the fucking world, hated the society that I was in and things like that. And then I watched like leftism, like basically turn into, like, and I was a degenerate, right? Like I loved eating ass and doing coke and stuff. But I was watching the world like really go gross, like just really watching it like turn more and more disgusting. And my mom just kept inviting me back to church and trying to like bug me, get me back to church. And I just started having these experiences with Jesus again. And I remember one thing, like, is as bad as an atheist as I was, or whatever I would call myself an atheist. I would still talk to God every day. I would still pray every day, which I think made me a bad atheist, because like I had so many experiences that like I knew God was there. I was just mad at Him, I guess. And I guess I was mad at the God my mom had presented to me. I had to find God myself, that sort of thing. But I'll tell you one story that like nailed down, like absolutely Jesus is 100% real, is I had a buddy that like, so in like fourth grade, he had cancer, and like this kid had like fucked up cancer. He had a lung removed cancer. And so now we're like in high school, and I'm like I'm a sophomore, junior or something, and he's like, I think he's a junior too, like whatever. And he was a dick. Like I love the dude. He was one of my best friends, but he was a dick. And he always had this mindset, like I could die at any point, right? Since like fourth grade, he knew he was going to fucking die right? So he just had this like YOLO kind of fucking mindset, which I was like a fucking psycho. So we had fun, dude. Like we like break in a house and we do anything. We do awful, terrible things because we were just like, fuck it, it doesn't matter. Lots of felonies, lots and lots of felonies as like young adolescents. And I remember one day I was over at his house and he just like, he had a big fucking jar of weed and he was like, do you want this? And he like, it was so out of fucking character. And he was like being like really nice and shit. And I was like, what the fuck is your problem? And he was like being super hyper generous and shit. And I was like, what the fuck's wrong with you, dude? And then like, we would go to San Francisco sometimes because he would have to go to, because we lived up in Northern California, but we lived more north than that. And he'd have to go there like every 6 months to do like, to the hospitals down there to like make sure, see how it was progressing and stuff. So he's had this for like over a decade. And I guess I found out that he was like, they told him like, you got like a month left. You're on all these fucking meds. They're not making anything better. You're going to fucking die. You're dead. And so then he was just starting to act, like a human. He started to act more like a nice person because he was just like, and I brought him to church. Like my mom kept bugging us to take him to church. And so like we went there and like my church is very hands-on, like everybody, like the entire church, like just put their hands on him and just started praying for him in tongues and stuff. And like the next week we went down to San Francisco down there together and he didn't have cancer anymore. It was just gone. It was absolutely fucking gone. And they had no explanation. They were just like, well, you were fucking dead and now you're not. And he's still alive.
Crap.
He's still alive today. He's a jackass.
Is he still a dick?
Always, yeah, but like in a good way. He's yeah, and I like to me that was so fucking miraculous. So and those things happen, right? And so you can fucking try to explain that stuff away, and like I'm sure the doctors did. They're not going to give any credit to Jesus, but I do. To me, like there was no physical explanation for that. I see Thomas right now. He's got one.
I'm not convinced.
Yeah. See,
still on the fence.
And I get it, man. And I remember seeing wild shit. Like, you want to hear a wild one? I've never talked about this on the podcast at all. I've never really talked about it outside of a church. I saw this person with a deformed arm that was about like 6 inches shorter than their other arm. And they sat there and prayed and fucking pulled their arm and he had a normal arm. And I watched this happen in front of me. And people will call me a liar, an idiot, a fucking, all the things. No, I don't even talk about it. I watched this person's arm grow 6 inches and go from like emaciated to like bony, kind of like fucked up.
Did they pass the collection plate around like right after that?
But that's not how my church was. I know there are churches like that, but like, no, man, no, they didn't. And
it plumped up, like, because I was thinking if I kind of did one of these jammies, I might be able to screw my kid over and convince him of something. But I can't make it plump up.
No, it plumped. It got plump.
It got hydrated. It hydrated right before your eyes. It got thick.
Buddy, it's one of those wild things. I can't explain it. I see Thomas right now. He's bursting at the seams. Sorry.
Well, I mean, because on a certain level, forgive me for tapping into the like nihilist middle school, phase, which you could probably relate to, right? But it's like, great, God came and fixed his arm, proof of God, proof of miracle. Who fucked up his arm? Wasn't it the same dude? Isn't that me like breaking into your house and then like a week later bringing your shit back and being like, hey dude, I found your stuff, and you're like, oh my God, thank you. It's like I think for me
the biggest one is actually like, why this person and not someone else? There's always things like that. And I guess my biggest explanation for any of that stuff is that like this world is imperfect. This world is temporary. Like this suffering that people have here is temporary. And like, this is all just kind of, and everyone absolutely has free will, because they say, why is there child murder? What, things like that. And you're like, well, because God gave this piece of shit free will and he chose to do with it as he did. And I don't know, man, it's wild to me. Like the more and more that I know that this place is temporary, the more and more that like, yes, there's horrible things that happen here, but it's kind of like, I don't know, it matters less because to me, we're going to eternity. We're going to infinity. We're going to like whatever God is, whatever, like, I don't know, man. Infinity, whatever infinity is, that's where we're going.
The only thing I'm upset with about that rant is that you skipped right over the ability to say and beyond. And I would have applauded you for that. I was like, is he going to do, are we going a little Buzz Light? Is that what's about to happen here? I thought you were doing it. It would have been all right. You know, speaking of why does God fuck up this kid's arm in the first place? Why does God create Lilith? What is Lilith? Let's get back to who this bitch is. Yeah, and I feel, am I wrong in having animosity towards her? Because I feel like she's not a good,
I think so.
And it's just rumors that I'm dealing with, but I feel like she's not a good person.
See, to me, before you answer that, because Thomas has the right answer, but to me, she is just the archetype of just kind of the hot, like, we're slut shaming, dude. Like, sometimes there's just dirty birdies, dude. And like, I appreciate
the first slut?
Like, dude, she was the first dirty bitch. You know what I mean?
I'm
like,
gonna name this damn episode the first slut.
Without even like the first time I was like, hey, I'm gonna come, and she was like, just keep going. Like, okay. You know what I mean? She's that girl.
More.
That's the spirit of
that girl is like where you go like, I don't have a condom. She's like, all right. You know, and lets you raw dog. You know what I mean?
Wait. I got to tell you, I have a saying, right? Whenever I see some sort of fuckery on the internet, you know, if I'm going through Twitter and it's showing me, I don't know, a bunch of people teaching kids how to be trans, I call it Nephilim shit. That's what I call everything that's fucking corrupt and shitty. I call it Nephilim shit.
I appreciate
that's Lilith, bro. That would be Lilith, in my opinion. She'd be the one that's like, now, and this goes here.
When I see hoe shit from now on, when I see hoes being hoes, I gotta say it's the spirit of Lilith. It's the spirit of Lilith.
The first girl that ate my ass, that was some Lilith shit.
100%. Yes. Right here, right now, this is 100% a thing. Lilith shit there's Nephilim shit, and that's just corrupt, evil bullshit. But things of the hoe variety, that's fucking Lilith shit, dude.
Lilith shit, dude. And so that's where this archetype came. That's where this like explaining like if your girl's kind of a whore, and Adam got mad. So like Thomas is gonna lay some details down, but like Adam was getting fucking pissed that his girl was like, dude, I remember the first time I got a blowjob by this girl that like it was a fucking Olympic class blowjob, and like I was appreciating it. I was like, holy shit. But then I kept thinking, I was like, where did you learn that? Who taught you this shit? Like you're too good. You're
so hungry.
What the fuck? How much practice do you have? Like, cause don't get me wrong, this
trainers
is fantastic, but I was like, God damn. Cause I was coming in with the feels, and I was like, this girl has had some serious practice. Like I'm not the first dick she sucked. And I kind of got upset. That was kind of an Adam archetype that I was having at the time. And I should have chilled out and just been like, Lilith, write it. You know?
Oh
and so, all right, Thomas, now drop some knowledge.
This is actually a great intro because we're gonna get Dirty Birdie as we go here. That's the best way to phrase it too. So like a couple here. Let's get some of the like the fact stuff out of the way so we can get into the Dirty Birdie stuff.
Get the fucking information. Let's get past that and we'll get into the fun stuff.
So there's a whole bunch of different word roots and gods, and they don't necessarily mean that it's all the exact same thing, but in the context of like gods whittling down into one god, let's just assume that it's all Lilith. So in Sumerian, you've got Lil, Lilu, Lilitu. In an Akkadian, you've got another archetype called Ardat Lili, and that roughly translated to like the perpetual maiden Lilith. So that's one of these aspects, is that she can't ever get pregnant. So she is the perpetual maiden. She's kind of like always going to be a virgin forever and ever, which also makes her this like perpetual maiden and this desire of like almost, you know, illicit lust in a way, because again, there's nothing you can do with Lilith that would actually produce in any sort of reproduction of like your own kind. It would just purely be for like the physical sensation or being lured in by the magic of it. So there's this one aspect of it. And because she's this perpetual maiden and can't give offspring, she becomes to represent other women who can't have offspring. Hence that whole like blaming it on Lilith if you can't get pregnant, or blaming it on Lilith if you lose the pregnancy, and just as far back as you want to go with that. So as they start making these depictions of the goddess, they draw up Lilith as this this female with like wings, and she's flanked by owls, and she's holding this little like ankh looking symbol. And she was also known to be the one that knew magic. She was known as the Queen of the Night. There's something called the Burney relief from the 17th century BC that basically has her with like a human torso and a human head, but she's got wings and talons. So this is this like reoccurring theme that owls represent, that she would come in the middle of the night. And this also is where they would used to say that if your husband had a nocturnal emission, right? If he wakes up and there's a wet dream, it's because he was visited by Lilith during the night. And the most wild aspect of this, they actually found like divorce papers in the form of those little incantation bowls, but it was like a divorce from a husband in a household to Lilith. And it was like, Lilith, I know you came in the middle of the night and, gave me a wild ride, but, my wife's here and I've got kids. So, please don't do that again. And this, is the official divorce from you. And they would go and bury it in the yard. So like Lilith
please stop stealing my loads.
Anything sex related.
Okay. All right. So does this have any connection? I couldn't help but think about it while you were saying it, this imagery of the harpy.
Yeah. And in fact, dude, they would say that in Kabbalah, they would say that the letters of Lilith in like a gematria are equal to the same of screech, kultov. I'm probably butchering the pronunciation of that. And this is because Lilith would be known to screech as an owl, and it was so loud and so high pitched that it would pierce your ears and it would drown out the prayers of the righteous. That was the way that it was kind of sound. So either that's just her making this horrible screech and drowning your ears out, and that's kind of the same thing as a harpy, right? That's, stop harping on this.
I should talk about that fucking succubus story later, too.
Yeah, I was going to be what you jumped right into. Well, this will be good because we're going to describe the succubus first, and then Nate can tell us what she looked like firsthand. So,
okay, all right. We got to remember that if we don't, we have to circle back. I have
he won't. Yeah, he won't forget.
An hour and a half. And once we get to an hour and a half, if we're not there, we got to fucking drop everything. I got to hear about what Nate saw in succubus, or we'll get there. We'll get there. But go on.
So this is like the concept of Lilith, and the other thing too is that the Lil, they were known as like these wind demons and these wind gods. So again, here's that connection to like Zeus, right? That you were saying, oh, there's this Zeus connection. Yeah, hell yeah, there's a Zeus connection in Baal, because they're all fertility gods. And even if you go into the Americas, way back before there was potentially connection, unless, Tartarian, ancient, whatever. But even before there was that connection, there was still the same exact concept that the agricultural gods and the wind gods are the ones that you sacrifice offspring and like your best stuff. Like that's where you go and you pour one out. You pour out the best one, always for the agriculture gods. And that's just like a human thing. And then to backtrack a little bit, when you guys were talking about like the religion and everything, I'm not sure if I'm ever going to be sold on like, yes, it's 100% true. I don't know if it's 100% allegorical, but I do know that it's so important that everyone in history has been spending all their time and effort and money and everything to making sure it doesn't get lost forever. So regardless of whether it's true or not, it's clearly important, has important information in it. So that said, this is also Lilith is the origin of magic in general, the way that we kind of know it in our various, especially in Western culture. But it started with those Lilith bowls. So that was one of saying like, oh, I can actually communicate directly to this god using these like talisman and these incantation bowls. But then we talked about the whorish aspect, right? The whore of Babylon. Lilith is that original whore of Babylon. So the Babylon, the Talmud, this is like 350 AD or something. Lilith takes on this extra set, right? It's this guy, it's Voltron that keeps forming, and now Voltron combines with 5 other and becomes like a super Voltron. So at this point, this like super Voltron Lilith, she also adapts the concept of like the old crone and the old hag. So now she's not just the perpetual maiden in that she's like forever going to be a virgin and coming in the middle of the night to like seduce your husband. But now she's the perpetual maiden in that like evil stepmother sense, like can't have kids anymore. And now she's threatened by this new sense of like life that's coming through the kingdom. And through this, she grows these like this long hair. And it's actually known that Lilith brings on the female curse of long hair, sitting while peeing, and a passive role of serving as a pillow for her husband, in parentheses, during sex. So those three things, long hair, you have to sit when you pee, and you basically have to be like the submissive one during sex. Those are all the curses that the Babylonians essentially attributed to Lilith. It's like, it's her fault, but sorry, ladies, got to grow your hair out, got to sit down when you pee. And there's all these very specific reasons as to why she gets blamed for this stuff.
Is that related at all to, and this is probably a stretch, but this idea of the old hag, right, in your sleep paralysis experience? Does that mean that the old hag is it's Lilith shit?
Yeah, and also remember, even before the old hag archetype, Lilith was like the queen of the night. So if anything happens in the middle of the night, like all the spooky things that go on, anything unpredictable, that's Lilith at work, because she's flanked by those owls. She can see at night. She's at home in the darkness versus during the daylight. So yeah, 100%, that crone and the old Lilith is the same thing.
So let me ask you this, right? She seems like a good time in a lot of ways, right? There's a lot of potentially redeeming qualities there. She likes to party, right? That's pretty clear. She's down for stuff. You could dump continuous loads in her and nothing bad's going to happen. What? Well,
no, see that's where you might be wrong, dude. Yep. You're not the one dumping loads. She's dumping loads. She's on top every time, all the time.
She's dumping loads in me.
To the point where you're like, yo, God, it's too much, bro. Like this, like we can't do this. It can't go on like this. I need something subservient. Otherwise I can't manage. So yeah, I mean, and in a lot of ways too, if you like the Lilith there, right? Remember in the 90s, or I don't know if I'm dating myself, like there was this big thing was like this Lilith bear, and it was basically like a female empowerment Woodstock. And the reason it's named after Lilith is because Lilith also comes to represent like that independent female empowerment where you don't need to be subservient to a man. And that's kind of, man, that's where a lot of the stuff diverges, because the concept of Adam telling God, hey, Lilith is too much. She always wants to be on top. She's trying to do this dirty shit constantly. Like, I just need a sweet girl that I can, like settle down with. That's this concept of like, okay, well, now that I understand what you want, you don't want an equal. But God's basically like, I made Lilith out of mud and I made you out of mud. So yeah, the homunculus.
Yeah, dude. I mean,
Lilith was a homunculus.
Me complaining about these like world-class blowjobs was my Adam archetype. This is like kind of what I was saying. But like once you actually like you grow up, you mature, you realize, that whole like you want to fucking a Lilith in the sheets and an Eve in the streets kind of thing.
Dude, that's got to be a shirt. That has to be a shirt. And if I make that shirt, I'll cut you guys in on it. So is that really what's going on there? Is that Adam was like, this bitch is just she's too, like, I'm into her, but where did she learn this? Dog.
Yeah, I mean, that whole story is that she was supposed to be made equal to Adam. She was also made of mud. She was also made of the dust of the earth, like Adam was. And so she was like, so she was like an equal to him, but she was kind of like, I'm kind of the top dog. And so she was literally top dog. She was getting on top, and Adam wasn't digging that shit. And so Adam gets upset about it, and he starts bitching to God, and God kind of like kicks Lilith out. And that's when he makes Eve from a piece of his rib, from a piece of him, to be a subservient mate, to be, someone lower than Adam. And so Lilith is that archetype of like that's why women have used that as like a female empowerment sort of thing, because she's the first feminist. She's the first whore. She's the first feminist. She's the first like sex positive. Like she's the first like, no, I'm riding that dick.
That's wild, because we're in this era right now where it's like people point to feminism as one of the main ingredients that led to the fall of the West, or we're currently in free fall. And it reminds me of that idea that I'm no biblical scholar. I'm barely coherent enough to be able to read the Bible. It's like every time I open it, I feel retarded because the language is so dense. But I know that there's this idea that in the end times things are going to be as the days of Noah. And I know a lot of people kind of are attributing all of the kind of rise in paranormal experiences that are allegedly happening to that whole passage. But it's really interesting to think that even this, we talked about before how all these entities and gods, they've been the same characters since the beginning. And the problems that we're experiencing right now are, if you take a biblical lens, I'm assuming that Lilith is from an extra canonical source, but this idea that bitch has been causing the same problems since the beginning of time. And right now, like I just said, we're looking at feminism as one of the key components to the fall of the West. And that's Lilith shit. Feminism is Lilith shit.
Yep.
Maybe. I don't know if I would go that far yet. I would say that feminism was like Lilith was the original feminist, but to equate her with like the modern Western freaking
Thomas, we all know the fall of the West is when the 19th Amendment, when women got the vote. That's when it all was downhill from there.
And women's suffraging, yeah. So and to put a feather in the top of this like historical Lilith, the last and I guess most specific book written about her from ancient times, it was called The Alphabet of Ben Sirah, and it was written between 700 and like 1000 AD. So like, a while ago, but fairly recent in comparison to like ancient Sumerian texts. And he writes that Lilith was described as the first wife of Adam, and she was made from the same clay as Adam. So it made Lilith the equal to Adam. So that's part of the that approach is like being an equal. And on their honeymoon, Lilith demanded to be on top, and Adam didn't want her to be like it turns into this thing. So out of frustration, she gets off, speaks the ineffable name of God, and vanishes into thin air. And that vanishing in the thin air is very literal in the original story, and it's most likely a reference back to the original Lilith being like a wind god or a wind demon. So when she evaporates back into thin air, it's like she goes back into like the elements, back into this like magical essence, as opposed to this like human form that can interact with other humans at that level. So that's kind of the last time we see Lilith. And at that moment, she becomes known as the whore of Babylon. She becomes known as a homewrecker because, again, she comes in the middle of the night to screw with your man and sit on top. And then when Cain and Abel fought, it was about a discussion of Lilith. So that's what actually caused that original conflict between Cain and Abel that caused the first murder. It's all surrounding around Lilith and the drama that she kind of brought with her.
So are you telling me that Cain was the first simp? Like Abel was like, dude, she's a hoe, bro. She's a hoe. You don't want anything to do with that. And he's like, no, dude, I could change her. She could be a good girl. She's wifey material. Like Cain was the first simp.
Have you seen those fangs, bro?
Dude, that is unbelievable. So we've established now. That Lilith was a super big hoe, and she was into freaky shit. And
that's fun Lilith, by the way. That's all. We're all talking fun Lilith, and then there's the not fun Lilith that comes soon after all of this.
Okay, so she's super mad.
Scorned. Yeah.
Oh yeah. She's
a woman scorned. Then we get.
Well, now every single pregnancy issue, every single thing that might happen to women or children, and this is where it gets weird, and we're not going to get too much in the details, but it's like, I'm going to make up numbers here because I'm totally off, but it's like the first 7 days or something, like a young male child can still be under the influence of Lilith. And then once you make it through like a certain passage of time, I'm making that number up, then it's like you're in the clear and Lilith can't get you. But for little girls, it's like 7 times as long. So like they're way more susceptible for way longer periods of time. And it's because like Lilith is just being kind of a dick. And this ancient concept was called, I'm looking up, called the arrow of Lilith. And the arrow of Lilith was just a strong pain in the body that was usually associated with miscarriage and deformities in the fetus. And they even called deformed feti the form of Lilith, a female demon with wings and a human face. So if you came out like little Bat Boy, you know, like the dude that Nate saw cured in front of his own eyes, right? When you come out of the womb like that, they would actually refer to that as, oh, the child's in the form of Lilith in these old dialects. So again, like, it would be an understatement to not attribute almost anything that can go wrong with childbirth as Lilith specifically. And then on top of that whole like weird fetus mutation thing, it was considered that because Lilith only came during the night and it was not sanctified by God and she wasn't in fully human form, if she did have sex with Adam or anybody else, she flies by and Nate has a wet dream, there's a good chance that later that night she gives birth to like werewolves and demons and like all kinds of creepy crawly monsters, and that's the source of all monsters, is that Lilith comes by, takes your seed, and then uses it to create monsters that can never become human.
And that's where we get into the Nephilim. That's where we get into Bigfoot. That's where we get into cryptids. To me, yeah, she's the mother of like demons. She's the mother of monsters.
But can that be bad? If she's Bigfoot's mom, can she really be a bad person?
No, dude. And Lilith gives great blowjobs, dude. We've already talked about this. Like,
she's got a lot of redeeming qualities, is all I'm saying. So Lilith is the kind of the original mother of dragons, right? And it's funny because what you're telling me, it rings in my mind. I'm like, man, this was an integral part of so many cultures at one point in time, right? And then we kind of lose this information, and then all of a sudden it resurfaces as a feminist parade, which I just think is funny. It's like back in the day, they were like, no, dude, Lilith shit is bad. And then fast forward to Western culture, and all of a sudden now it's a sort of a symbol of something that's good and synonymous with women's liberation and things of that nature. And it's like, talk about just adopting a shit symbol. Probably should have went elsewhere. You know, I don't know how long ago this march was, but like Martha Stewart's pretty cool. And she probably would have been a better mascot than, like, you know, the mother of demons. But, you know, they lose information.
I don't know.
She definitely fucked Snoop, right? We all agree with that, right?
What's that?
Oh, that she fucked Snoop.
I'm pretty sure she fucked Snoop.
100%. Yeah. She was embodied by the spirit of Lilith. And yeah, she rode the dog.
Buddy. Yeah, she rode that bone. Yeah.
So how do we get into this whole...
Wow, yippee-yo-yippee-yay.
It feels like such a jump. She's a freak. She doesn't want to be in missionary. Adam doesn't like this. And so God's like, well, fuck her. We didn't need her anyway. And then all of a sudden she starts birthing demons. You know,
for
like
130 years. Yeah. As soon as she gets kicked out and Adam has Eve, then Lilith comes in the night for 130 years. And for every single night that she does that, creates more and more monsters and puts them out in the world.
Holy crap.
And then so, there's a whole thing too, where they like kill the monsters and the demons. And then she gets scorned. She's like, all right, well, for every like 100 of my monsters that you kill, I'm going to kill a human child. So it's like she ramps up the infant mortality rate because people are killing off all of her offspring, and she's pissed off about it.
Man, that is really interesting because, you know, the story of the Nephilim, as most people know it, is, you know, the fallen having children with the daughters of man and giving birth to, what is it, the heroes of old, or the heroes of renown, however the Bible says it. And then, you know, there's extra canonical books like the Book of Enoch, and I think there's even is it Jubilees, the Book of the Giants? I'm not really sure the name, but goes into more detail about it. But this concept of so is this where you would get giants, right? Giant of Kandahar, or people say like Hercules was more than likely what you would consider a Nephilim. But then as far as these creatures go, these hybrid monster creatures, that's Lilith's doing.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, Lil were these like fertility and wind gods and stuff, and Gilgamesh was considered to be the offspring of a Lil. So one of the things that Nate and I have come up with a few times, and I love this theory, and maybe it's shout out to Joel Thomas, Nephilim Portal Babies. Like, I can't remember where this came from, but if you imagine that, like, Adam and, like, just to make it simple, Adam and Eve are like giants, right? They're 60 feet tall, and then they bang, but then, you know, at some point someone else comes along, so they're not like just banging, you know, inbreeding. We don't get into that right now, but like someone comes along and then they basically breed with someone that's not as much of a giant as they are, like a complete normal person, like a little, you know, 6-foot person with the 60-foot. And after that happens over time, people just gradually get shorter and shorter and shorter until, just in practical sense, we consider a giant to be, you know, 9 feet tall or something. When in reality, it might have just been like, if you keep breeding Great Danes with Chihuahuas long enough, then they all kind of turn into, like, you know, like miniature Great Danes. And then people will never believe that there was ever such thing as a Great Dane that size of a dog. So there might be some aspect to that. That's the more, you know, realistic approach, I think.
I like that. I'm adopting that as something that I believe to be true. That's now part of my belief system. So how does this get resolved? What happens to Lilith? Because you said that she's just popping out monsters for 130 years, which is a long time to pop out monsters, right?
Well, she makes that deal essentially where she says, like, hey, if you keep killing my monsters, then I'm going to just keep on, you know, killing human children as they come out. So there's almost like an agreement that's made where it's like, okay, for every X amount that we kill, you can kill this amount. And I think in some ways it explains the infanticide. But then the next evolution in the Lilith story, I think, is she kind of becomes Satan. She becomes like magic and the devil and Lucifer and black magic and witchcraft and just everything all together. And when Michael Jackson, Michelangelo paints the Sistine Chapel ceiling, when he paints Lilith, he gives her a half human body and a half snake body. She's the first shape-shifting reptilian on top of all this. And she's depicted as coiled around the tree of knowledge. So it's basically like saying, like, Lilith, in terms of Michelangelo, and I really do think this is like some Michelangelo Illuminati, here's the secret code word if you're paying attention shit. It's like Lilith is the snake in the tree of knowledge, but all of this magic and all of, like, here's how you can ride, you know, Adam in the middle of the night, and I was created from the same thing as you, were equals. That's this dangerous knowledge that she represents and gets kind of cast out. And when, remember, the last thing she did was she says the ineffable name of God, meaning that not only are you not allowed to say it, it's just impossible to say it. Like, you will explode if you say it out loud. So she says it out loud and she vanishes. So as part of that, you know, she basically is representing this knowledge. Like, here's this knowledge that you're not allowed to know, the name of God. And the second she says it, she gets cast out. Just like Adam and Eve, it's almost, if you imagine, if they heard the ineffable name of God, they technically also have to get kicked out of the garden because now they know too much. You're not allowed to know, you know, Kaiser Sose's real name, right? Once you know Kaiser Sose's real name, you get kicked out.
Man, that is really interesting. That is like a paradigm shifting component. You know what I mean? Once you start to plug that in, you have to start to rethink everything that you think that you understand. And then you've got to look at everything through new context. You know, turning into the first shapeshifter is how you described it, right?
Well, that's how Michelangelo depicted her. Yeah,
that's really interesting. So, what do you mean, like upper body of a woman, lower body of a snake?
Yeah, like she's got a half woman body, and then the bottom part of her is a snake. It's a serpent, and it's literally coiled around the tree of knowledge. So I mean, it's really very specific. It's not like, oh, I wonder what he was going for here. You know what I mean? It's like she's a snake wrapped around the tree of knowledge in the Garden of Eden. And previous to that, her story was that she was Adam's first wife and says the name of God and gets kicked out for it. And that's, in my mind, that's that sacred knowledge. The same thing we've talked about Noah before. There's that concept, the what is it, the curse of Ham? Or
and how about like a jealous ex-wife corrupting his new wife? You know,
get her out of here, bro. Like, she can't, like, if she knows what me and her, like, if my new wife knows what me and Lilith used to get up to, this is not going to work. Get her out of here.
That whole story about the forbidden fruit, I mean, it could have been Lilith, like, teaching Eve how to suck a dick.
What's the ultimate forbidden fruit, right? Like, oh, I bite this and I know math, or like I bite this and you just get like a world rocking VJ, right?
I bite this and I know math. It reminds me of Aleister Crowley, right? What was Aleister Crowley like? Obviously, he's into all these dark arts. He's almost a poster boy for occultism, but it's this sex magic that he practices.
Yep.
Right. And it's once you start to think about Lilith in that context, it's like, oh shit, this is some dark art shit. Like sex magic. Apparently, the act of sex can go either way. It can be this loving engagement between a husband and a wife, or it can be some mystical, magical, dark arts ho shit.
Woman. He needed that scarlet woman to bring about, the whore of Babylon, to bring about the moon child, that the demon, to give birth to a demon. He needed his Lilith.
Well, that's the homunculus. That's when you prepare. And again, like that's the fetus. Lilith is known as the one that causes things to go wrong at childbirth. And Crowley's Babylon working, the whole ritual is basically you find the right woman and you wait until she's like a month or two into a pregnancy, because according to Crowley, the fetus doesn't have a soul at that point. So if you can take the woman out into the middle of the desert, it's like as far away from anywhere as possible. Again, let's go back to Baal Zephyr, right? Like these caves in the middle of nowhere, where it's like windy all the time. You bring this fetus out, and the woman at that point is just a vessel, right? And inside the woman vessel is another little vessel of this like 2-month fetus. And it's like the ultimate vessel within a vessel. And this attracts God. So if there's wandering demons and wandering spirits out in the middle of this like vast expanse, so if you're in a city, they've got all kinds of options, right? They can jump into like, I don't know, like TVs and Nintendos and people like left and right. But if you're out in the middle of the desert, it's slim pickings. So not only is it slim pickings and the first thing they want to jump into, but if you make the most attractive vessel possible, you roll out and it's like a limo and the red carpet comes out. That's kind of what Crowley's trying to do with the Moonchild. So that essentially would be Lilith, right? Like the god responsible for something going wrong during the initial like childbirth. And of course, the Crowley, it wasn't just one god, Lilith. It was, under the stars and depending on how you would astrologically align everything. But he's pulling on this exact same concept of as above, so below. Just like in when people were worshiping Lilith, you'd have the little talismans and you'd wait for the right astrological sign. And then you'd like pray with all your might for the gods of the planets to come down and, get stuck in this little talisman. And you can bring the talisman into your house. And now it kind of like rubs off on you for a little while. So that it's sort of the same concept here.
It's just strange because it really is the same, like the backdrop that is the story of all the fucking paranormal shit that's going on and all the corruption that's going on in the world. So many people look at Elon Musk and Donald Trump and they speculate. I do it constantly on this show. This show might as well be called Speculation because it's all I fucking do. But this idea that is Trump the moon child, is Elon Musk the moon child, all of this shit, like literally
the moon child.
Yes, the players on the world stage right now are directly connected to Aleister Crowley and the what is it, the Babylon Works was the name of what he was trying to accomplish with the Moonchild, which is directly connected to Lilith, this extra canonical biblical character that might be fucking the serpent in the garden. It's the same fucking story playing out all the way to 2023, right before our fucking eyes. And every day we go on Twitter and we see another Trump thing or we see another Elon post, and it's like we're looking in this tiny little window all the way back to the fucking garden. I just find that bizarre. It's a great story. You know what I mean? It's more entertaining. I say it all the time. It's more entertaining than anything you're going to get on Netflix anytime soon. Like, this is the story, this long ass story that's been from our, conception in the garden all the way forward to right now, where Elon Musk is launching dick-shaped rockets into the upper atmosphere. And, Donald Trump is trying to fight back for the presidency. It's all the same story.
To be fair, I don't know if we've discovered any technology that doesn't require a dick-shaped object just for the aerodynamic purpose alone, right? Like, you're never going to have a non-dick-shaped rocket until we change those laws of physics.
Well, dude, space is fake and
it is gay. So that's why you keep sending dicks out there, right?
Sweet hog, to get in there.
We're trying to appease space. We're like, come on, we're giving you what you want. We know you're fake and we know you're gay. This is what you like. I just, the whole thing with Crowley and the Babylon Works and the Moonchild and Lilith and all this shit. It's like, I'm a fan of Merkel, and we're everybody in this kind of conspiracy paranormal sphere right now is all kind of on edge for like what's going on with portals, what's going on with creatures, what's going on with Nephilim, what's going on, and it all seems to be on this giant uptick. So not only do you have the backdrop of these political characters and these tech influencers and things like that all have this sort of biblical connection. But if you take a look at the paranormal side of things and what's happening on the internet, because I do think I'm a big fan. I don't know if you guys are aware of Nuke's Top 5. Do you know that guy? Mm-mm. Oh man, Nuke's Top 5 will fuck up your night. Potentially. It's basically what the guy does is he creates compilations of, the spookiest ghost videos on the internet or demon sightings and shit like that. And honestly, the thing is like 85% trash, but then there's this remaining. That's a fucking intimidating look you got going on there.
Yeah, I just realized that I didn't have the right light on.
Yeah, this is the right. This is the right light. Whatever you say from now on looks like it's coming from the mouth of a demon. But there's like a remaining 15% of these videos that will send you. Like the other night, I'm sitting there with my wife and I'm watching this video of somebody recording their backyard. And, you kind of get a feel for whether or not people are genuinely scared or if they're acting. And you can tell pretty easily when somebody's got a production going on. And then you can tell when somebody just happens to be in their backyard recording with their camera phone because something weird's going on. And there's this fucking like goblin voice in this guy's backyard in the tall grass. And it's fucking cackling at him. And he's asking it to come out. And it's saying no over and over again. And then it's asking him if he wants to play. And it's fucking absolutely terrifying. I don't remember how the video ends, but there is this, it feels like we're inundated now. There's a really famous video from a guy that was recording in Florida of this, I think it was in Florida, on Facebook Live of this translucent, I don't know what it really looked like. It looked like a big fucking monster running across his backyard. So the guy starts the video and he goes, I'm telling you guys, this is where it was. It was right in the backyard. And he gets up and he goes to show people. And suddenly you see this thing run across his backyard. And the way this guy reacts, number one, is fucking hilarious. Because it's like when black people see magic and they run away. It's very much like that kind of a thing that's going on. He starts freaking out. And he sees this translucent thing run across his yard. But so do like 100 people in the live chat. Like 100 people see this fucking thing too. Everybody starts trying to pull it back and screen record. And they're talking about it for like another hour after that. And I feel like these things are on the rise. So it's just strange to me that like there's multiple aspects that you can look at right now where everything, like you were saying earlier, somebody took a lot of care to try to make sure that this story survived. And there's probably a really good reason that even though we've gone through cataclysm after cataclysm and cities have fallen and Rome is burned to the ground and all these various, terrible atrocities have happened through the human history, this fucking story remains and it loses a little bit as it moves forward. But there are still these core elements. And now with the extra canonical books kind of coming back into the mix, and I think they're getting more popular lately. I have the Book of Enoch somewhere, although I don't read it. I don't know why the fuck I do that. I buy books and I go, one day the grid's going to go down, right? Like we're going to get an EMP blast and then I'll have plenty of shit to do. But until that happens,
the real reason. They'll never let the grid go down because then everyone's going to start reading books and then it's all over.
Exactly. I got a library of forbidden knowledge that's just not tempting to me unless you take away Twitter or something like that. And then I'm going to go, maybe I'll fucking read some of that stuff. I have like an 800-page book by Albert Pike. I'm like, I'm never going to read that thing. I need an apocalypse in order to read that. Yeah, exactly. Morals and Dogma. The thing is like, 10 pounds of book, and I flip through it every once in a while. And I'm like, it's fucking cool. Never read a page. So one day when the grid goes down, I'll have shit to read. But our story in life feels so bland we go through the repetition of like going to work and paying the mortgage and, stomping out fires and fixing things. But the backdrop to our boring ass lives is like the most tremendous story ever told.
Well, I think it has to be, otherwise it doesn't survive. So some aspect of that is practical. Like if you don't make it the most interesting story ever, then it's not going to last more than 20 years. You know what I mean? It's going to go away. So it has to kind of be over the top. And it's also like this sunken cost fallacy a little bit, where it's like, well, if all of civilization's been putting everything into this, we might as well just keep that ball rolling even if we don't understand why. That's how it's always been done. So that's how we're going to keep doing it. I think there's also an aspect of that. But I also want to note, I don't know if, like, obviously things get lost, but I think we might gain more. Like as these gods adapt and turn into new things, they represent stuff that's more practical and relatable to the current people using it. Like if people were worshiping Lilith now, but they were only basing it on the culture and the period of like ancient Sumeria, she wouldn't represent enough things to actually help us deal with normal, life. And then I also wanted to mention that we mentioned like this uptick in paranormal and stuff, but if you go back historically, we're still far away from how like accepting people were of the paranormal like 100 years ago or 200 years ago, like at the height of the spiritualism movement after like the Civil War, right? Everyone knew, like so many people died in this country. Everyone knew or was greatly impacted by the death of many family members and friends. So everyone's just surrounded by death for a very long time. And they all kind of turn to spiritualism, where like we get together and do podcasts and talk to each other, or maybe you go out to the bar or whatever. But back then, for a good stretch of a half century, like the thing that everyone did in their free time was like summon ghosts, do seances, and use like knocking boards and talking boards. So, I mean, I would say that as a whole, it seems like society in like the late 1800s was probably way more into the paranormal than we are. And even if you go and look at old newspaper articles and magazine articles from 1910, 1920s, they're all talking about Jupiter and Kronos and Baal and Moloch and Bacchus and, all of these ancient gods and the Phoenicians. They would still kind of do some of these mock things. And then, as soon as over time you get into like the 40s and 50s, golden age and conservatism, like all that gets thrown out the window. So, I mean, that literally 100 years ago, people were like marching around with like a big effigy of Moloch in the streets and worshiping him. And that was just like, oh, is it Thursday already? Oh, crazy. You know what I mean? But if you did that today, people will be losing their shit.
Yeah, we don't have context for it now. So maybe you're right. It's like these things, they don't even necessarily have to be on an uptick. It's just that when you see them, when they pierce the veil of like your super average person's life, it's like world shaking. Whereas if you had a paranormal experience in the 20s, you'd be like, that's just fucking Moloch, dude. It's no big, it's just Lilith shit. This is regular, everyday, normal occurrences. But since we've kind of lost that, right? That spirituality, especially in the West. And just because you don't have the teachings and just because you lean more towards a conservative worldview doesn't mean that these things stop happening. And so they're continuing to happen, but we have no frame of reference, and we're certainly not armed to deal with them, right? Like I told you, I'll invoke like the name of Christ. I don't have other recourse, like what do I do? I don't want to start. I'm not going to get a Ouija board. The whole burning sage thing is just like, I don't like, there's chicks with, crystals and armpit hair that are like, burn the sage in your house. I don't want to fucking burn the sage until you shave your armpit hair. I'm not going to listen to you about what I should do about the spirits. But that's the only people that we really have, unless you're going to, podcasters, I guess. The only people that you have that are, what would you call them, chaperones to the spiritual realm are chicks with armpit hair. And I don't want to listen to them. And I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't think that you are equipped to arm me against the forces of darkness. All right. I don't want to. And if you are, I'm going to feel real fucking bad about myself. Like if I listen to you, even though you haven't shaved your legs in 3 years and it fucking works, I'm going to have some real soul searching to do. Like, what am I doing wrong?
All right, Lilith, how good's your BJ work? Let's see. They don't know how magical you are.
It's funny what you said. It's just that, like, we don't have the context anymore, and we don't have that, like, especially in this westernized society that we live in. But to me, I think that that's on purpose. And I go back to like the elites occulting this sort of shit, because you see things where like, man, I'm trying to remember where the fuck this was. I think this was like in fucking Germany or like Switzerland. They built this fucking bridge, and like there's a video of it. This happened like what, 5 years ago? Thomas, do you know what I'm talking about? Where they like built this new fucking bridge, and it was like a group of like government officials, and he did some fucking ceremony for the opening of this fucking bridge.
Yeah,
and
I know what you're talking about.
Do this crazy weird fucking ritual. Like, to me, it's like the elite, they still practice this shit. They still have knowledge of this shit. They still know this shit. And they almost want us to know nothing about it. To me, it's like when you say we have no context, I'm like, that's because of the fucking schooling that we've gotten. That's also like the occulting and like manipulation of like the majority of the churches. Like, I think the majority of the churches hide that shit from you. I think Catholicism and the majority of like evangelical Christians and things like they hide those that they call it spooky shit. They call it evil. They call it, and they don't want you to fucking know anything about those sort of things. Like when I talk to my wife about like different like symbols and things, she's like, that's just evil. And I'm like, and I was having those conversations with her. I'm just like, well, maybe some of those symbols represent evil, but like, I don't think they always did. And I think that like the church will like, they don't want you to know what these symbols mean. They don't want you to know what the power behind them are. They don't want you to know the story. Like, why are those books not canonical? Why are some of these stories, to me, it's like they weren't.
That's some Gnostic goober talk now.
There we go, man. This is when they'll start calling me a Gnostic goober again. And that's okay.
Yeah, I think that these you can look at it through the lens of like these books are coming back for a reason. Yeah. Who am I to say that these books are definitively good or definitively bad? And just because I read something doesn't mean that I have to internalize it and believe it and incorporate it into my worldview. It's just information to consider. Like I said, I've been a conspiracy theorist for 16 years, and everything is just information driven. And I will admit, it is hard to sink your teeth into a book and not be swayed. And maybe that's part of the problem, right? It's like I can watch a show, or I could watch a movie, or I could watch a documentary, and I can consider the point of view. But if you read a book, it's like I would say the highest way outside of like, those videos where people will put on headphones and they'll listen to indoctrination shit while they sleep, and that's how you like brainwash somebody. I don't know if that actually works, but outside of that, that is the most impactful way of absorbing information.
You're talking about?
What's that?
Psychic driving, where they like MK
that's what it's called.
Status, where they're like, you're a homo, 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 you're a homo.
Exactly. I'm going to play that on loop while I go to sleep, and we'll see what happens in the morning. But they're
pounding Bud Lights when you wake up.
Just surrounded by Bud Lights. I had this dream that there was this succubus riding me on top. I wanted her to get off. She wouldn't get off. And I woke up, I was just surrounded by Bud Lights.
Buddy.
But I think that maybe that is that is something to be careful of, because I'm one of those people when I do read, I get lost in it. And, it's so imagination driven. You're envisioning everything that the person's saying. And maybe there's a deeper level to that. Maybe it is dangerous. But I think you just keep that in mind. Like, don't take this for, pardon the pun, but don't take it as gospel. Just read it and consider it and see how it fits into the bigger picture. Because honestly, this Lilith thing, it just fits into, I always say on the show, my job here is I'm just assembling a jigsaw puzzle. And I'm taking the audience along for the ride. And what I try to do is have guests on that can bring me a new subsection of the puzzle, and we can see how it fits and if it starts to make a bigger picture. And I think the Lilith thing fits pretty compellingly. It starts to create a picture where things just click together too well. And honestly, I don't think I'm going to let it go, because Lilith shit, that's my new jam now. I'm throwing that all over every time I see somebody doing some hoe shit in the streets. You ever see like those riots where like it's a bunch of chicks and they're like twerking on an ambulance? Like, that's fucking Lilith shit, dude. Mm-hmm. That's 100% Lilith shit. That's the disembodied spirit of Lilith fucking inhabiting just poor hoes in the streets.
Creating
and
monsters.
so, yeah, creating
The
monsters.
epitome, dude, the epitome to me of like Lilith shit. There was a music video that came out, oh man, and I can't remember the artist's name, but it was a song where there's these two ghetto black girls, and the song goes, "I got murder on my mind, murder on my mind."
Oh, Planned Parenthood.
The Planned Parenthood. She's sitting there talking about like, I ain't gonna let a little N-word grow inside of me. And she's like, it's talking about like just straight getting abortions. I got murder on my mind. And she's rapping it, dancing on top of the car, shaking her ass in front of the Planned Parenthood.
It's better than it sounds.
Yeah.
What are you telling me? It sounds amazing, dude. I'm 100%. That's my next tweet. Is I'm pulling that up. I'm finding that video and I'm tweeting that out. That's Lilith shit now. Man.
That's some Lilith shit, doggy. That's some Lilith shit for sure.
And again, the perpetual maiden. So if you're just always making sure that you can't summon a moonchild, right? Then you're the perpetual maiden. You are literally Lilith.
Oh, you're the
all of a
object
sudden you just have empty wine bottles, a fucked up uterus, a bunch of cats, some thick fucking rim glasses, and you just hate everything.
Dude, that's funny, right?
Because now you're talking about the crone version.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the archetype that all of a sudden is being celebrated, right? It's what's this bitch's name? The fucking unfunny comedian.
All of them.
Every one of them. Yeah.
No, she fucked 50 Cent.
Yeah.
Chelsea Handler.
Chelsea Handler. You could also insert Sarah Silverman or any of those.
Yeah, they're embodied by the spirit of Lilith, and they're trying to convince you that like childbearing is not for you, having a family is not for you, living a life of perpetual sin, drinking wine and popping Xanax at 2 p.m, and then going skiing with your tits out. That's the way, and that is certified Lilith shit.
Yep.
Well, listen, guys, we just hit the 1.5 hour mark, and I do have to cut this one short. I want to ask you, though. You know what? I'll ask you off air, so we'll get to wrapping this. Is there anything that you'd like to say on the topic of history's biggest hoe?
I don't know, man. Did you want to hear that succubus story real fast?
Oh, fuck yeah, dude. Let's do that.
Okay. So this is not firsthand, unfortunately. It's secondhand. So I think I'm about 10 to 12 years old, somewhere around there. And I'm at summer camp, and I'm at a hardcore Christian summer camp. Like again, praying in tongues, casting out demons kind of summer camp. This is like where we all go. And our cabin hosts or whatever you fucking, what do you call that, Thomas? Like like camp counselor, I guess, but the dude that's like in your fucking cabin with you. It's two twin brothers.
They're chaperones.
Chaperones. Call them chaperones. So they're probably at this point, they're probably like 19, right? And so we're all like 12, and they're in charge of the cabin. And they're telling us their testimony, right? And how they had been like hardcore, like Satanists and stuff. And they were telling us a story. And they had been like trying to cast a demon. And all of a sudden, they like both of the brothers are sitting there. They had been sitting kind of like a salt circle and a pentagram and stuff like that, and like trying to like cast demons and things. And this fucking they manifested a succubus, and they're describing this woman, and she has like the absolute perfect hourglass, dude. Like big, fat, perfect, like symmetrical, round, voluptuous titties, dude. And a thin waist. This chick was not a fat pig, but she had like fat in all the right places, right? And she had a big fat ass, sweet dumper. And she's just looking at him, dude. And I'm trying to remember exactly what she looked like, because she might have had like, she almost was like a Medusa, because I think she almost had like kind of like serpent-like kind of hair, and then she had jet black eyes. Mm-hmm. She had jet black eyes, and she like comes to him, and they're like, "Oh fuck yeah!" And I'm pretty sure I think they said they're like kind of double teaming her, and they're sitting there, they're having sex with her, and they were like, it was the most intense, the most pleasurable, and they're sitting there describing this to like a room, like a cabin full of boys, like sitting there describing fucking a demon, and so they're sitting there trying like describing it, and then they kind of like look at her, and they kind of see like her face kind of change a little bit, and they kind of realize like, oh wait, like this isn't the most beautiful, sexy thing. This is almost like an evil kind of like, oh, they kind of got her crone face a little bit too, like, but they're also like mid fucking, you know what I mean? So they're like mid coitus. And so they were like, no, we can't do this. And so like they called out upon the name of Jesus and this thing. And so this to me, like Thomas, you're talking about the screech, you're talking about the banshee. She lets out this scream. She goes, ah! And like lets out this scream. And he says that you could see like the sound waves and you could feel it when it hit you. Like he said, it was like, but you couldn't hear it, but you could feel it. And it just like threw him. And then she disappeared. And they changed their life and they turned to Christ after that. And somehow or another, they became our camp counselors and stuff like that. But hearing this story as like a fat little horny beaner, like as a kid, I was then just like running around, like saying anything I could, trying to get a demon to suck my dick. For fucking years, dude. I was like, why can't I get a succubus to blow me? What the fuck is going on? Anyways, I don't know the validity of that story, but it's fucking fantastic. And this is something that I grew up thinking that could absolutely happen. That if you did it the right way, she would come and fuck you.
I just love that's how susceptible we are, though, right? As like when we're real young, you know, you could say all this stuff about this demon and her face transforming and her hair is like snakes and, you know, Jesus had to come and save you. But like the main part was like, how voluptuous were the titties? How are we talking? Like is this like an 8-pounder? Is this 16 pounds worth of titties? Like, what are we talking about here? Go back to that part.
I ask the story that your camp counselor tells you about getting banged by a succubus, is that better or worse for children than if it was just like, you know, a drag queen came and read you a book about a caterpillar?
Dude, all I know is that if they had been in a dress, it would be a sin.
Right.
That would be some Nephilim shit.
But the fact that they weren't in a dress, then it's all kosher.
That's it.
They were warning us about Lilith. They were giving us a story about, because that's the whole crux to a testimony. Look, I did all of these I did dirt, but now we can worship Jesus together.
Is it just like a humble brag? Like, yo, check out this crazy shit. Oh, but you know, JC, you're the guy now.
Yeah.
But like, wasn't that a badass story, bro?
You know? Dude, those titties though. Damn titties though.
18 pounds worth of titties. You know, part of me is considering sending my kid to a Pentecostal summer camp just because to come away with stories like that, you know? I mean, just you started the story by like, you know, they show up, they cast out demons. So these guys are sitting in a salt circle and they're getting ready to catch. That's the type of shit that goes down at summer camp is they show up ready for, that's like spiritual war camp. That's not a summer camp.
Buddy,
that's like,
I was literally taught spiritual warfare from the time I could walk. That's absolutely what they would call it. Like, yes, we are in a spiritual battle. And the battle is not in flesh and blood. It is all in spirit. That is exactly what I was taught.
Well, you know, that's really not that bad. I'm glad to hear that somebody is out there arming children against Lilith shit, especially, you know, young children, young impressionable children. You got to teach them how to fight back against, I guess, essentially wet dreams, right? Based off of the whole she comes in the night, so do you, and then she births.
Well, yeah, if you get a wet dream, you have to write like a whole poem on like a plate and then bury it underground. That's the only way to fight back against that.
Wait a second. We're about to wrap up the show. You got to arm people better than that. What do you just grab a plate and you just
it's called an incantation bowl. So you take a plate, you draw Lilith in the middle of the plate, and you basically say, Lilith, stop tempting me. Lilith, stop tempting me. And as you write that out, you draw in like a spiral, like almost as if it would hypnotize you if you were to try to read it. And that's you talking directly to her, trying to hypnotize her into taking your message. And you basically bury that like under your front door, which again, when we talk about like Lilith being like some of the original instances of folk magic, this whole concept of like burying like and making a barrier around yourself. Nate mentioned the salt, right? The salt is kind of the same thing. It's like a protective barrier that you put around yourself to keep things out or in. It's exactly what these incantation bowls of Lilith were. It was like, if I bury this plate under my front door, then she won't come in. Because she's not invited. Again, like vampire lore. Again, all monsters, in my opinion, go back to Lilith. Every single one of them does.
So if there's one thing to take away from this episode, men, to the and it's predominantly men that listen to this show, although I do believe I have a decent amount of women. We just upset them. But protect yourself, steel yourself against the number one threat to humanity, ho shit. You have to protect yourself against ho shit. I mean, you look throughout history, and evil women have been the downfall of so many of the great historical men. And it seems that these women were maybe just the disembodied spirit of Lilith fucking shit up throughout history. I'm willing to go with that. That's actually I'm accepting that as my new paradigm. That's the lens that I look at life through from now on. So every time I see Cardi B, I know exactly what the fuck I'm looking at. I'm not looking at Cardi B.
For sure. Doja Cat's trying. She's a tryhard. But yeah.
But I wouldn't too flippantly use Lilith as like a derogatory term to like, let's say you were just trying to make fun of Cardi B and call her a whore. If you also call her Lilith, though, you're saying that Cardi B is able to speak the ineffable name of God, which is still reserved for a different class of, of like beings than, just your typical ho shit being like the ultimate queen bee ho shit, right? Like if you're Iceberg Slim, like this is your queen bitch, which is not the same as your bottom bitch.
Mm-hmm.
Beyonce is on Lilith shit. That bitch is like, mother of darkness, fucking full body Lilith shit.
Rides on top always.
Oh yeah, 100%, 100%. That's why if you look at Jay-Z, he's just becoming like stranger and more retarded as time goes forward. He used to be like a really normal kind of dude, and now he's like, kind of.
I would blame more of that on Marina Abramovich than
that was that is some Lilith. That's 100% Lilith shit. That right there is that's
there you go, bro. That's the real Lilith.
Definitional. Stuff. Well, listen, guys. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for the class on Lilith. It was a genuine pleasure. One last time for the audience, tell everybody where they can find you.
realityzars@gmail.com if you want to send us some love mail, some hate mail, some dick pics, or any of that fun stuff. Hit us up. Yeah. And Thomas, paranoidamerican.com.
That's it, man. Paranoidamerican.com. I've got all sorts of comic books and coloring books, and towards the end of this year, man, 2023, I'll have a game on Steam pretty soon that's called Lucifer Lives in Lower Manhattan that goes all into this Lilith shit.
Dude, Thomas is so fucking cool. He's got all the fun shit. Go check out paranoidamerican.com. Anything you're looking for, he's got it.
And even if you're not looking for it, I got that too.
That's fucking awesome. Video. I'm definitely gonna look into that. What's the game called?
It's called Lucifer Lives in Lower Manhattan, and it'll be on Steam by December of this year. I've been working on it for like 2 years now.
That is fucking awesome. So guys, go and check out those links, check out their work, and to the audience, thank you for tuning in to the Ravens Watch. And until next time, have a good night.